Josh Harris. In that place between wakefulness and dreams, I found myself in the room. There were no distinguishing features save for one wall covered with small index card files. They were like the ones in the libraries that list titles by author or subject in alphabetical order. But these files, which stretched from floor to ceiling and seemingly endless in either direction, had very different headings. As I neared the wall of files, the first to catch my attention was one that read, People I Have Liked. I opened it and began flipping through the files. I shut it quickly, shocked to realize I recognized the names written on each card. And then, without being told, I knew exactly where I was. This lifeless room, with its wall of files, was a crude catalog system of my life. Here were written the actions of my every moment, both big and small, in detail my memory couldn't match. A sense of wonder and curiosity, coupled with horror, stirred within me as I began randomly opening files and exploring the content. Some brought joy and sweet memories, others a sense of shame and regret so intense, I looked over my shoulder to see if anyone was watching. A file named Friends was next to one marked Friends I Had Betrayed. The titles ranged from the mundane to the outright weird. Books I've read, lies I've told, comfort I've given, jokes I've laughed at. Some were almost hilarious in their exactness. Things I've yelled at my brothers. Others I couldn't laugh at. Things I've done in my anger. Things I've muttered under my breath to my parents. Kindly stood for what's right. I never ceased to be surprised by the content. Often, there were many more cards than I had expected. Sometimes, fewer than I'd hoped. I was overwhelmed by the sheer vast amount of time I had spent. Could it be possible that I had time in my 17 years to write each of these thousands or even millions of cards? But each card confirmed truth. Each was written in my own handwriting, each signed with my signature. I pulled out a file marked songs I've listened to and realized that the files grew to contain their contents. The cards were packed tightly, yet after 2 or 3 yards, I still hadn't found the end. Shame. I shut the file. Not so much by the quality of music, but by the vast amount of time I knew the file represented. When I came to a file marked lustful thoughts, a chill ran through my body. I pulled on the file only an inch, not willing to test its size, and drew out a card. I shuddered at its detailed content. I felt sick to think that such a moment had been recorded. An almost animal rage broke in me. One thought dominated my mind. No one must ever see these cards. No one must ever see this room. I had to destroy them. In an insane frenzy, I yanked out the file. But as I began pounding on the floor, I could not dislodge a single card. I became desperate and yanked out a card, only to find it as strong as steel when I tried to tear it. Defeated and utterly helpless, I returned the file back to its slot. Leaning my forehead against the wall, I let out a long, self-pitying sigh. And then I saw it. The title bore, People I've Shared the Gospel With. Its handle was brighter than those around it. Newer, almost unused. I pulled on its handle, and a box no more than 3 inches fell into my hands. I could count the cards contained on one hand. And then the tears came. I began to weep, sobs so deep that the hurt that started in my stomach shook through me. I fell on my knees and cried. I cried of shame, of the overwhelming shame of it all. As the rows of file shelves swirled in my tear-filled eyes, no one must ever see this room. I must lock it up and hide the key. But then, as I began to push away the tears, I saw him. Oh, no, not him, not here, anyone but Jesus. I watched helplessly as he began opening files and reading the cards. I couldn't bear to watch his response. And in the moments I could bring myself to look at his face, I saw a sorrow deeper than my own. He seemed to intuitively go to the worst files. Why did he have to read every one? Finally, He turned and looked at me from across the room. He looked at me with pity in his eyes. But this was a pity that didn't anger me. I dropped my head, covered my face with my hands, and began to cry again. He walked over and put his arm around me. He could have said so many things. He didn't say a word. He just cried with me. And then he got up and walked back to the wall of files. Starting at one end of the room, pulled out a file, and one by one began to sign his name over mine on each card. "No!" I shouted as I ran to him. All I could find to say was "No, no," as I took the card from him. His name shouldn't be on these cards. But there it was, written in red, so rich, so deep, so alive. The name of Jesus covered mine. It was written in his blood. He gently took the card back. He smiled a sad smile and began to sign his name over mine again. I don't think I'll ever be able to understand how he did it so quickly. But in the next instant, it seemed I heard him shut the last file and walk back to my side. He put his hand on my shoulder and said, "It is finished." I stood up and he led me out of the room. There was no lock on its door. There were cards still to be written.